Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 168, written by Hedfonemusic, a taco truck bound to them by fate and more. I was driving home from work last night. I was in a bit of a rush, so I was driving fast. I was hurling down the freeway at 85 miles per hour, windows half down, the stereo singing to me, and yellow sunlight warming my surroundings. The road was irregularly desolate, as there were no other vehicles near me, an odd theme for 5 p.m. on Monday evening. Typically, there is a steady flow of traffic at rush hour. The car closest to me was about 100 yards or so ahead of me. There were no other vehicles to either side of me or behind me. As I approached the appropriate exit to bring me home, I threw on my turn signal. I scoped out my mirrors and did a full head check to my rear left. The coast was clear, and I proceeded to hop into the left lane. Halfway through the execution, I realized that I was neck and neck with a box truck. I was flying down the freeway at nearly 90 miles per hour, and I was merging into a vehicle 5 times the size of mine. At this moment, time seemed to almost stand still. As I made eye contact with the other driver, I read the panic on his face. My eyes scanned the rest of the vehicle as I braced for impact. I was able to make out the logo on the side of the truck. It read, Don Pancho Tortillas. My knuckles glared white as I clamped my grip. My shoulders stiffened as I flexed my back. My brow scrunched and my eyes squinted as I clenched my face. At that point, I heard what I can only explain as the beginning sound of a collision. A sharp noise of clashing metal, yet only briefly. The sound ended almost as soon as it began. As I relaxed my grip and unsquinted my eyes, I regained focus. There was no box truck. There was no collision. I was in the left lane unscathed. Happy to be alive and a bit vexed, I pulled over to evaluate the situation. I had no explanation. I was just happy to be alive, happy to go home to my family. Later that evening, my wife and I decided to take the family on a walk. I was putting our 6-month-old baby into the stroller, standing in the open doorway leading outside. As I was buckling the baby in, my Siberian husky, Luna, darted between my legs and outside. My neighbor, Steve, was standing in his front yard with a friend directly across the street. Luna, being the cuddly wolf that she is, decided that she needed to go say hi to Steve. I quickly calculated the recipe for disaster that was to unfold right in front of my eyes. Luna began to sprint down our driveway towards Steve and company. My house obstructed the view of the road from my vantage point, but the faces on Steve and his pal illustrated the danger that was coming. The familiar slowing of time that occurred earlier in the evening was back. As Luna came within a few feet of the road, the approaching truck began to join with my line of sight. The angle of pursuit was on course with an imminent collision. I glanced at Steve and his guest as they both frantically waved their arms and yelled for Luna to stop. At this point, Luna was halfway in the road and the truck was about to make impact. Steve and his friend both grimaced and looked away as to not see the horror that was about to occur. I also closed my eyes. I was certain that when I opened my eyes, my beautiful Luna would be deceased. Thank God, somehow she survived. She made it across the street to Steve's yard. She was absolutely shook but uninjured. She was laying on her back while howling and crying in Steve's yard. She refused to get up for several minutes. She came to eventually, and we went home. For the rest of the evening, she was extremely affectionate and refused to leave my side. This morning, I was rethinking the situation over and over in my head. I decided to have a look at the footage from my Ring camera. There was a car parked in my driveway that was blocking my view of the dog, but when the truck came into the field of vision, it clearly read, Don Pancho Tortilla. Case notes, file number 168. There appear to be 3 glitches in this. The first one is time slowing down. To this, though, one can simply attribute it to a flood of adrenaline. It's known that in extreme dangerous situations, people can exhibit both superhuman strength and reflexes. Our brains basically hypercharge themselves and our bodies. But this can cause damage, which is why we don't maintain this level all the time. Then there's the fact that you crashed into that truck. You even momentarily felt it happening, heard it, and then it never happened. This could be quantum immortality. Could very well be that you crossed over at that moment into a parallel universe. Which in a way is cool. I haven't read a story about quantum immortality in a while. And finally, the fact the same truck that may have killed you in the original reality somehow found its way down your road later that same day. That's bewildering, like dots on a paper somehow connecting you two even across realities, if that is indeed the explanation. If you happen to notice anything off in your day-to-day life, even tiny little details, that could signify that quantum immortality did indeed take place. The author responded to my comment, saying, "There have been a few things that seem odd since all this happened. My wife and I had a trip to the beach planned for the 4th of July. I brought it up last night and she had no idea what I was talking about. I also could have sworn that we booked a hotel, but when I checked, we have no reservation." Case file number 169, written by Anonymous. A late evening drive with an out-of-world twist. I was driving to a friend's house around 9 p.m. tonight. It's only about a 10-minute drive, but I noticed something weird after about a minute of driving. There were no streetlights on that portion of street. I thought they must have just been turned off or something, but these 5 or so streetlights on that portion are a fairly new addition to the road. My car has a squeaking noise that I'm trying to find and can't figure out, and I noticed that the sound wasn't happening anymore. I also was thinking how quiet it was sounding, and I realized my tires were not making any noise. My window was down. I have mud tires as of last summer, which make a distinctive rumbling or whir sound while driving, but the tires I had before these made no noise. At this point, I thought that something strange was going on, and when I pulled up to the next stoplight, I looked at the funeral home across the street and noticed that they had all flowering bushes in front of the building, rather than the newly made parking spots. This light also just didn't change from red to green for about 3 minutes, and with no other cars around this whole time, I just drove through the intersection because I thought it just wouldn't be changing anytime soon. These changes I noticed are indicative of what my drive to my friend's house would have been about 3 to 5 years ago. Is it possible that I shifted back in time 3 to 5 years just during this drive? Or maybe an alternate reality? Once I got to his house, everything was normal, and I told him about the events. Driving back home, everything was back to how it normally is. Case notes, file number 169. I think it's us that you traveled to the past without a retrofitted DeLorean, more that your perception was aware of that timeline. Perhaps it was a perception of another parallel universe. If the theory is true, many of them are overlapping with our own. Out of phase, in a sense, would be a good descriptor. I know I'd love to hit up the past, even just to see what my old high school looked like, through the lens of my current personality. If you enjoyed these stories, give the video a like.